All right, today we're going to look at SQL injection. So this is a CTF, capture the flag system. I'm not going to walk through the whole process of the CTF. Rather, I'm going to take a particular technique and hone in on that. There are a lot of tutorials that give walkthroughs of these CTFs if you get stuck, but I feel it's more important to hone in on the valuable techniques that you learn from these CTFs. These are super important. I really think that people should be able to put these on their resumes. I guess you can, but I don't think companies take them as serious as they should in terms of learning. And to me, that's just a lack of understanding of offensive security, because these are extremely invaluable. You learn tons of techniques, technologies, methodologies, exploitation techniques in doing these CTFs. Not to mention you learn critical thinking, and something that's kind of becoming a lost art with chatbots. But you learn critical thinking, you learn thoroughness, and a good ability to problem solve in doing these challenges. So I can't speak enough to how important I think these are. I really think that they should be looked at more valuable than I feel they sometimes are. I think some people look at them as they're just games, but they're not. They're real world training. I've taken several security courses through OffSec, EC Council, and tons of others, read plenty of books cover to cover, and these CTFs have taught me more than any of those courses or books. Not to say I haven't learned from those, I've learned a lot, but doing these things hands-on, dissecting the process, and really diving into these techniques and understanding them has really broadened my arsenal of knowledge way more than any course. So there's my plug for CTFs. So that said, let's jump into this particular technique, which is a SQL injection technique on a system called NullByte. I will put a link to the system in the description of the video if you want to check it out. It's totally worth it. So here we go. At this point, I've enumerated the system, and I've discovered a hidden directory in the web application. So let's look at this. We have an input field. The first thing that jumps out here, there are several attacks as soon as you see an input field, right? But that's my key right there. Search for usernames. I'm searching against something, right? A database, most likely. So let me just run a quick search against admin. Fetch data successful. Great. So I can deduce just by the fact that we've got an input field and it's a search functionality returning data that this is some kind of SQL select statement running on a database. And to ensure that, I want to find a way to force this database, if in fact there is a backend database, I want to force it to cough up an error message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a quote, and there we go. We have an error message. It's a MySQL server. So let's go back and let's launch an attack. I'm going to bring up Mousepad. Now, in the course of doing these CTFs, one thing I highly recommend is take notes. Take really, really good detailed notes, and from those notes you extract commands and techniques and just a good solid repository of information that you can call on when needed. I think that's extremely important to have. Nobody remembers all this stuff off the top of their heads. It's literally impossible to remember every command, every technique. There's a lot to know and understand, and good thorough note taking is really important. So that's another little side note for you. So that said, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull from some of my notes, and I'm just going to copy and paste. And this is where this comes in handy. It's less work that I have to do. It's less typing, less I have to remember every time. I could just copy and paste, knowing what I'm looking at here. So we have a SQL server, MySQL server. I'm sorry. So that's good to know, because we want to know what type of server we're up against as far as database server, because whether it's SQL, MySQL, Postgres, if I'm saying that right, Oracle, they're all going to have different syntax that you need to work with. So this is MySQL. So I know the syntax. I know commands I can execute. So I'm going to put this in a mouse pad so that I can see my command and alter it, because once I put it into this field, it's not going to be as easy for me to work with. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a union statement, and I'm cutting off the select statement, adding the union statement, which is really just adding another select statement, which is pulling out columns. This is 4 columns. 3 of them are going to be null, and in one, I want to pull the database version. So let's see if that works. Okay, so this is what we want, because this is how we're gonna fine-tune this this query until we have the right number of columns. So the select statements have different number of columns. Okay, so we either have too many columns here or too little. I'm going to take one away first because it's more likely that maybe it's just too many columns. Let's see. We are going to paste that in. And there we go. So this has 3 columns. The first 2 are null, and the third is sending us the version of the database. Third column, employee position, M position. Okay, great. So we've got that. So now let's dig a little further. Now, knowing that we have 3 columns, what we want to do is try to see if we can dump the actual databases available. Let's see here. I want to do admin. So, same as above, but instead of looking for the version, I'm looking for schema name from information schemata. So that should give us available databases. Let's give it a try. And here we go. So we've got 5 databases. So information schema, performance schema, MySQL, these are all basic databases. I'm going to jump to the one that is not a normal basic database that you would see. The outlier here is Seth. This seems more like a proprietary database or a user-created database, admin-created, whatever. So I want to now say, okay, Seth looks interesting. I could certainly look at all these as well, but this is the non-standard database in the group. So let me see if I could find what tables exist in that database. So let's build another query. And by the way, you could do this with SQL Map. SQL Map can be a little time consuming and it's very noisy. If you run SQL Map and run Wireshark, you're going to see a ton of traffic. So SQL Map's great for automating the process, but like I said, it's a little time consuming sometimes and it's noisy. I find this to be quicker and easier personally. And it gives you a better understanding of what you're doing. You're not relying on an automated tool to do everything and just display what it finds. You're learning as you go here. You're building your own queries and understanding, what they do. So from information schema tables, we're looking for anything in the Seth database. So here we have users. So there's a users table. Awesome. So now we're going to continue to step through this process. And what we want to do is we want to say, we've got that users table. What columns are in that table? So again, information schema columns where a table name equals users. And again, null columns, right? Our third field will display the columns. We could put it in the first and it'll show up in emp ID just so you see how that structure works, but we're going to go with the last. So here we go. So we get a result for each column that exists. So we have an ID, a user, a pass, and a position. So clearly the most important thing here we're looking for, or things, are the user and the password. So let's write a query that's going to extract the data from these 2 columns and the Seth table, a user's table in from the Seth database, and display that to us. So as you see with this process, we're really just walking through enumerating this database and its tables and columns and fields until we can extract useful data from it. And we're doing all that with this blanket statement here, and we're just adding to this concat statement or concat command. And in doing that, we're getting the databases, we're getting the tables from the databases, we're getting the columns from the table. And now we're pulling the user and password values separated from Ceph database users table. So let's see if we're able to get some useful information here. And there we go. We have a user and what looks like either a hashed or decoded password value. So I'm going to leave it to you to mess with that on the side and extract that actual password and see what you can do with it to get a foothold onto the system. But this was just an example of how SQL injection can be used to really footprint or enumerate the database and ultimately extract information from the database just based on a vulnerable field that does not do any kind of syntax checking or anything like that. It just allows you to inject these SQL queries that are ultimately passed to the underlying database and executed, with nothing to prevent that. No guardrails in place to block you from executing these queries against the database. No validation, input validation, or anything like that. So, hope this was helpful. Again, I'm gonna start taking. I've done tons of these capture the flags, and it's really helped build my level of knowledge over the years. And like I said, I got more in my knowledge arsenal from doing these than I do from any course or any book I've read. Even though they are important as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying ditch everything and just use CTFs, but they should definitely be a tool in your arsenal because they're really valuable. And I know a lot of people will argue that a lot of these techniques you'll never see in the real world. I will say that's BS. I think you'd be really surprised with how horrible security is in even big organizations. Some very large organizations overlook a lot of things and just don't have people in place who understand these concepts of offensive security. I've seen it firsthand. People running security in organizations who are absolutely clueless to any of these techniques and I don't even think some of them knew what the term SQL injection even was, never even heard of it. And they're running security for big organizations. It's kind of scary. So think of that, and then you take a lot of smaller organizations that don't really invest in security. Yeah, a lot of these things you'll see on CTFs, believe it or not, are out there in the real world, plenty. So use these to your advantage. Again, I'll put the link to Nullbyte in the description. And if you like this, please comment or follow. I appreciate it. And if this is helpful, I'll definitely start taking from those CTF exercises little tidbits of knowledge and techniques like I did here, and just honing in on those instead of the full CTF. I'll leave it to you to do the rest of this machine, but there's a part of it. So thanks again for watching.